Welcome to the session entitled Dane County Communities Address the Housing Gap. So everybody knows they're in the right spot. Hopefully that's the one you were looking for. My name is Neil Stechschulte. I'm the Director of Economic Development for the City of Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. So welcome. We're all here because we acknowledge both the challenges and opportunities related to workforce availability and affordable housing that we are all facing. This is not a unique situation really for any of our communities. We're really all are working with this right now. And we're here to learn from one another about what is working for each of our communities and find ideas that we can take back to our own communities. That's one of the beauties of the public sector, I like to say, is that we have no copyright laws. We copy each other early and often. If we find somebody else who's really figured out a good idea to do things, we're not bashful about borrowing and stealing. So I'm excited to briefly introduce our panel today. I'll ask them to provide a little bit more information on themselves when they start their presentation. But first I have Trustee Melissa Ratcliffe. She's going to be our first speaker today from the Village of Cottage Grove. Our second speaker is Karen Victorson from the Village of Oregon. She'll be number 2. And then also have Mayor Aaron Richardson from the City of Fitchburg. So pretty good, great panel and different diversity, I think, of kind of where folks are at in terms of their housing planning and work. So this will be great. We're going to ask folks to try to save questions probably to the end of the presentations if we could. We're going to try to keep things moving and do what we can to really stay on time. Going to be asking them to kind of share their local initiatives, efforts, obstacles, and lessons learned as they develop and aspire to develop affordable housing policies and practices. So to kind of help our panel a little bit, be in the best position to answer their questions and maybe tailor their presentation a little bit, I want to do a quick poll of the room here. So raise your hand if you are an elected official from a local county or state government. So a few in the room, good, okay. If you are a staff person from a government unit, anybody? Lots of folks there, great. So we can do that. Representative for an advocacy group on affordable housing, or anybody there? Excellent, great, couple folks there. Also looking at just a private developer or builder. One, okay, a little bit of everybody. It's a good diverse room today. Or just anybody else just interested, anything not listed there, another just interested in affordable housing. Anybody not one of those ones? A couple of other folks there, great. So, all right, guys, so kind of a shotgun approach, a little bit for everybody there. So, with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Trustee Ratcliffe to go ahead and start our presentations here.
Thank you so much. All right, I'm Melissa Ratcliffe. I'm a Village of Cottage Grove trustee and Dane County Board Supervisor of District 36, which includes the Village of Cottage Grove, the Town of Cottage Grove, and the Town of Pleasant Springs. I became interested in the issue of affordable workforce housing after attending last year's housing summit. I was only able to make it for about an hour and a half, but I saw this graph that showed that Cottage Grove has no affordable housing units, but we have people in our community that need the assistance right now. Cottage Grove is known as a bedroom community, which means that more of our population works outside of it than works in it. We've been trying to get more businesses to come to our community so we can be less of a bedroom community. So I thought, what can I do? Education, that's how I approach things, and so I wanted to learn more. But I thought that it would be beneficial for my whole board, the village board, to learn more as well. So I contacted Olivia Pari, because I think each community's needs are different and are in different spots along the housing needs, depending on your community's vision for the future. So when I contacted Olivia, she was able to give a presentation to our board in January on how communities can expand their housing options in Dane County as a sort of primer to our community about the positives of having different types of housing available to residents. We also watched the Minding the Gap, the housing crisis in Dane County video. If you haven't seen that video, you really should check it out. It was a great resource. Let's see, in February, Nicole Solheim from Gorman Company did a presentation on housing options to support businesses to our Community Development Authority. And then this was from one of Nicole's slides, that she notes that the benefits of having housing options is that so residents can live, work, and play in their community, and that people can age in place over time to come back to our community as they're able. The other thing to note is that if there are housing options in a community, then businesses have reduced employee turnover and business cost, which was very important if we want to attract businesses to our community. In March, Jacob Klein with JT Klein Properties gave a presentation to the village board about how economic development breeds further economic development. Then in April, we had 3 candidates run and be elected to the village board for 3 at-large positions. And they ran on the benefits of having housing options in our community, because there was a housing development at the time that had been stymied for various reasons. So they won. So our village board became a little bit more open to the idea of having housing options. The last presentation was by Kirk Paulson, who just spoke at our lunch. And he wrote the Dane County Housing Needs Assessment and the 2019 update. At our board meeting, he delved deeper into the need for housing options and how it helps the community to have affordable housing. So in my community, as I've learned about workforce housing this past year, I've learned that building affordable housing units isn't about bringing new people into your community. It's about maintaining your current population. As you can see on the map, the circled area here, the lighter part of the rectangle is where the village of Cottage Grove is. The rest of the dark brown area, which is my district, that's the town of Cottage Grove and the town of Pleasant Springs. The light color means that there's a lot of people in our community that are younger. We average about 35 years of age. The darker brown is that people are 60 years or older. There's more people living there. So with that, it means that in the village, we have a lot of single-family homes because we're in the Monona Grove School District, so we attract families to our community. This is great, but it poses us a challenge when the children graduate and parents are left and there are big houses. They may want to downsize to a condo or apartment or smaller house, but we don't have that type of housing in our community so much right now. And when the children graduate from college and may want to move back to be by their parents or be back in their hometown, we don't have smaller houses or condos or apartments for them to live in so much. So what that means is the children don't come back to our communities, or the young adults don't come back, and parents don't stay here. We aren't maintaining our population. We're just bringing in new families once the old families have grown up. We're pricing ourselves out of people and not providing for our current residents. So I thought about my community, and the main thing is that Cottage Grove is focused on is getting commercial development. And then I thought about our current residents and how most of them work outside of our community. Most of our current housing stock is single-family housing, and what I've learned is that commercial and residential development go together. It's hard to have one without the other, and new businesses mean new workers, and new workers that will probably want to live in their community where they work. So then in July, Moving Out came to our plan commission with a concept plan to develop an apartment complex with about 100 apartments. Moving Out is a company that builds multifamily units for low to moderate income households with 25% of those, with up to 25% of those for veterans and or families with disabilities. The current area that Moving Out is looking at is currently zoned as planned business, and this corridor is sat empty for a long time along West Cottage Grove Road. So this whole area has been empty, waiting for businesses to come in for the past couple of decades. And so the circled areas where Moving Out is looking at building. Also, that this area, our CDA made that a TID area in 2018 to try to promote some growth. So our village planner, Aaron Ruth, who's here today, he, along with the Plan Commission, has been working on updating and amending the comprehensive plan so that this area and areas throughout our village can have different options besides just business, and that includes the multifamily housing. and affordable housing where they can fit into neighborhoods. We did poll surveys, and SurveyMonkey was conducted so that we could get input from our residents about where they thought multifamily and commercial should be in our community. And so the SurveyMonkey was done last October, and a lot of questions and information were obtained from, we had 278 respondents. I found the results that were based on age to be the most interesting. We can tell that people's perceptions of our community were based on what their needs were and are by where they were in their life, what their age range is. Such as people in their 20s and 60s were more likely to say that they wanted more variety in housing in our community, and people in their 20s were less likely to say that multi-family housing was developing too fast in our community. People in their 60s thought that senior housing was growing too slowly, whereas the other age groups thought that we had enough. So this shows that there's a misperception about the village's actual development over the past years. We don't have enough senior housing, and we don't have enough multifamily housing. We don't have enough housing options to maintain our current population. I've heard from numerous people in Cottage Grove that when their kids graduate from high school that they're going to leave because it's too expensive. As a village trustee, I don't want people to leave. I want people to stay in our community because I think it's a great place to live. So what it tells me is that our residents need amenities and housing options so that they'll be able to stay in our community and not have to leave a place that they've called home for 15 to 20 years or more. So what to do? Education is what we're continuing to do in our community to provide background information as to why housing options are important, especially if moving out does plan to come to our community. And we need to, let's see, where you can start is where I started. I contacted Olivia, she's a great resource, or you can contact me. So the next steps are the villages that we're doing is that the village needs to amend our comprehensive plan at an upcoming meeting this month. And we're having some discussion in our community about doing a housing task force so that we can find out what our community's housing needs are and what our businesses' needs are. And in addition, the housing task force can also help educate our community about the importance of having housing options and how it benefits our community. So I'll give it over to Karen.
Karen, all yours.
All right, thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Karen Victorson, and I just first want to thank Dane County Housing Initiative for inviting me to represent our group from the Village of Oregon. It's an honor to be here. I'm a little nervous because I've not done a PowerPoint presentation before, so please be patient with me. So a little bit about my personal background. I have been a resident of Oregon for 15 years. My husband and I have raised our 3 kids there who are now 21, 18, and 16. My background educationally is I have no housing experience whatsoever. I have a master's degree in speech pathology. So I worked with birth to 3 kids in Dane County and in Dodge County. And so my basic, my interest in housing came through my volunteer experience. So after I worked for several years, I chose to stay at home with my kids and raise my kids. And through volunteering through church and in our community and schools, I became aware of the need of housing. And so currently right now I'm on a few boards. I started a nonprofit called Friends of Oregon School District, which partners with our schools to help eliminate basic need barriers to learning. And also I'm on Opportunity 34 Foundation, which helps at-risk students get scholarships and also mentoring in their years at college. And then now also started the Oregon Housing Coalition. So I guess I have a lot of energy for this. So just to kind of review what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm just going to give you a little background on the Village of Oregon, what we look like population-wise and all that kind of stuff, and then also our housing needs, and then go into how we got started, how I started the Housing Coalition, and then also what next steps and challenges that we're facing. So the Village of Oregon, this is just a little synopsis here. We're a little community, well, kind of mid-sized community, I guess, south of Madison. Population's about 10,000. I take issue with 25 minutes to Madison. I do it in 15 because I go 80 down 14. But yeah, so it's a great location, and a lot of people choose to live there because of its proximity to Madison. We are a young and growing community. The heart of our community is our school district. A lot of people choose to move to Oregon because of the school district and its proximity to Madison. So we have a lot of young families that live there and are also looking to move into the community. So as far as the needs in our community, we worked with Kurt Paulson as well. And we pulled out, using the Dane County Housing Needs Assessment, the 2015 census, we pulled out some basic housing data, and there is a sheet on your chairs that really gives some more detail about the housing needs and things in Oregon. That's the flyer that we give to people when we do presentations. But just some basic things there. Our average median income is $76,000. Average home price is $226,000. Both of those numbers are definitely a little bit low, we think, because that's 5 years ago, but wanted to be as accurate as we could with the data. So, and then as far as cost burden households, half of those are seniors. And then our school district has given us the numbers of 18% of our students are on free and reduced lunch. So how I got started in this, it's interesting always to find out how different communities start processes like this. I got involved with this through my volunteering, as I had said before. I became connected to key community leaders, village board members, school district administrators, social workers, pastors, and other residents that were involved with housing. And basically in those connections and conversations that we had over the years, the issue of housing just came up again and again and again. And the question comes up like, we're always gonna need a food pantry. We're always gonna need food packs for students on weekends because we're not addressing the core key issue, which is housing. And so as we've lived in Oregon for so many years, we've just noticed that more and more people are needing these services, but we're not addressing the core need, which is housing. What are we going to do about it? And so I'm the dumb person. Well, maybe not dumb, but I'm the person that said, you know what, let's do something about it. Let's get a group of people together and let's try this. Let's organize this. So luckily I had some people that were really smart, and I surrounded myself with some smart and experienced people. Our village president connected me to residents in the community. Rob Dick, who spoke today from Dane County Housing Authority, lives in Oregon. Very nice and convenient, as well as some other board members. I'll go into some more detail about that. But we had some smart people that I got connected to that really helped me, point me to other resources. And Olivia Perry as well was very instrumental in just getting this started and helping me wrap my head around what's the scope of something like this, because it's extremely overwhelming. And then the village we are very blessed again to have village leadership that is passionate about affordable housing. So we just have a new president that came in this past year, and that's her priority is affordable housing. So I just think it's one of those perfect storms that we just had the right people in the right time and good leadership and good connections that allowed us to start something like this. So we started a couple of years ago, and this is our structure. We have a president, that's me, a vice president, and a secretary. We put together 3 different committees to focus on land and projects. So They help put together a project when something comes up and to look for land. Education and advocacy, so getting the word out in the community and educating the community, as well as a policy committee, just keeping up to date on what's going on in our government and our local governments. Our meetings are real informal. Anybody can come because it's a grassroots effort. It's not the privileged few. It's open to the community. So it's advertised as such. And so we've had community members come in and out, and we meet one time a month for 1 hour at our village hall, and our village planner just reserves the room for us, and we show up, and I'm very strict about the 1 hour time limit. Some of you, I know, maybe, so my husband does a lot of meetings. He works at M3, and so one of those things is that you always stick to an hour meeting because people really can't pay attention much longer than that. So that has had, I think that has also helped keep people coming over the last couple of years, is we value their time, and I value their time. This is a volunteer effort, and I just don't want to take up any more time for people than is necessary. So that's our meeting structure. So this is our goal, and this was based on the housing data that we received. And our housing gap was roughly 200, and it's actually a little more than that, and we know that's more than that at this point, but that's what the number that we chose to use because it really addressed the most extremely cost-burdened Oregon residents. And so our goal is to educate and to advocate. And so really trying to get in front of projects before they come so that when, especially in a small community, there's a lot of that NIMBYism. And so trying to get in front of all of that before there's a big, like, oh, I don't want this in my community. So that's been our big goal, is to try and find the opportunity to do these housing units and also just be able to get in front of the community before they come. I'm just going to go through a couple of these. And it's also on our sheet, we had some goals and objectives. These are the things that were really important to us that Olivia pointed out as being essential as we got started. And the most important things are, we looked at our comprehensive plan to make sure that it included language about affordable housing, and it did. And then our village had closed a TIF district a few years back and set aside some money for that for an affordable housing fund, which, again, perfect storm, walked into that situation where we were blessed enough to have that kind of leadership that thought ahead to have that housing fund. Then we went around and we met with Kurt Paulson. We looked at the data. We put together this flyer, have a fancy logo, and that helped us go out to community groups and just say, hey, look, there's a need in Oregon. In Madison, you might see it more. In Oregon, you don't see it. And so really the only people that tend to know about it are our pastors or our school district, social workers or teachers, things like that. So it's just an unseen issue that people need to know about. And then one of the big things that we really wanted to do is make sure that we secured funds to keep what affordable housing we had in Oregon. So we have two. One is a senior development, and then one is for seniors, as well as one as for people with disabilities. So we're still working on that. We're hopefully going to get some good news in December about grants that were applied for, but those were some of the big pieces that we wanted to make sure that were in place. Finally, so as far as just our next steps and challenges, one of the challenges is understanding it's a really long process. I wanted to jump in and go, let's get a project, let's go, here's the land, it's right there, and it just doesn't work that way, I found out. So it's a marathon, not a sprint, and right now the marathon is finding land. We have a village that is landlocked, and so we have pieces of land that are available, but landowners that either don't want to sell for whatever reason, we can't find them. And so we're leveraging those small town relationships. Somebody who's lived there for 30 years that's on our committee gets to go and knock on that person's door and say, hey, have you ever thought about doing some kind of a development for seniors or for people with disabilities? So we're just really starting that process. And we've had a little bit of interest, which has been exciting, having people that are owning that land come to our meetings and find out more. So that's exciting. And One of the other things that we're working on, one of our village board members that's on our committee is working on a fund to help update current homes. We have a lot of older homes in our village, so trying to do, I think I saw Project Home. Is that your, yeah, so some similar, like doing some partnerships like that and establishing a grant fund so that people can update and keep their homes updated. So those are a few of the things, and then our next steps and challenges. So, just in summary, it's basically, it's so much about connection and finding those people in your community who are connected. I don't know what communities are represented here, but finding those key people that have a passion for housing, passion for your community, and also who have different kinds of connections. And also just understanding that it's going to take time, and it could be a 10-year process, and really being aware of that and securing different kinds of ways of keeping the community aware and educated throughout that process is one of the most important things. So there's my contact information if you're interested. Thanks.
Mayor, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. All right, here's the least important slide. That's me. Elected this spring on city council for a couple years before that. 9 years on Parks Commission, but also a lifelong member of Fitchburg, fifth generation of my family, which is why a lot of stuff really means a lot to me, how we grow, how we continue to grow. And so, hopefully we continue to grow responsibly and continue to be a place where anyone can really choose to live in Fitchburg as well. One of the things I did on council was co-chair of the Fitchburg Housing Task Force. And so that's where a lot of the recommendations and the things that we're doing came out of. And so I'll go through some of those as we go through here. Growing population as of 2018, about 28,000 people. I'm guessing with the census will be close to 30,000 people. Second biggest suburb behind Sun Prairie and Madison, and third largest community in the county then. 754 businesses, over 17,000 people in the labor force, and a low unemployment rate. Pretty big tax base and growing with some of our businesses as well. Great bond rating, income right around $70,000. Average home valuation, $294,000, which is pretty high. 15 years ago, I bought my house for under $200,000. My neighbors just sold their house for around $400,000. So pretty extreme growth, and one of the challenges that we face. We just had Viridian come in with a proposal for some houses, and they're nice houses, about 18,000 square feet on a pretty small lot, and they're going to go for around $300,000, and that's what's now considered affordable, which blows my mind anyway. But we see a lot of houses going for $400,000, $450,000 brand new. So $300,000, when you see that, is sadly affordable. We have quite a bit of diversity, predominantly white, but do have a significant population of Black and Hispanic as well. What we did for housing is we had some housing goals established way back in 2009, but didn't do a whole lot until we did a housing assessment in 2014. We did kind of the same thing. We kept the TID open, a smaller TID, for an extra year. You can use that towards affordable housing options, and really, if you don't do anything else, that's the number one thing that you should do as a community. Almost all these things that we're going to talk about and things that you can do need money. Money it doesn't solve, but it helps a lot of those issues. And so that's one thing that we are going to continue to do. We have a couple TIDs that will close in the next 5 years, and they're a lot bigger TIDs. And if I remember right, it's going to give us about $3 million or so to use towards a number of different projects. And that's really when you can start doing some pretty significant things in your community. So we did our housing task force. We had about 52 stakeholders from not only the community, but other people like, Kurt Paulson, Rob Dick, all these people you guys know, Habitat for Humanity, really tried to make it as inclusive as possible to get as many great ideas as we could. And We had a bunch of public participation meetings, and it was approved on by the council in 2019. It's on our website. You're welcome to go out there. There's a lot of different recommendations. Some are better than others, but some of them are also kind of dependent on what's the environment right now. Some things work better now, some will probably work better in the future. But that's all out there available for anyone to look at and look at some of those things. One is keeping the TIDs open an extra year. That's a big piece. Another one that is most of you actually already do, but sadly the Dane County Housing Authority is not authorized in Fitchburg right now. We're the only city in Dane County. Wanakee is the only village in Dane County that does not authorize them right now. But we're establishing a housing task force, and we just approved some people this week, and we got a few more people to put on that. The very first thing that I've told them is that the Dane County Housing Authority needs to operate in Fitchburg. So that is coming. Wanakee, you're on the clock. You're the only one left. So some of the things we learned then, first, there's a lot of housing that's kind of de facto housing in the northern part of our city. And those were things that were built when we were just a town. And they were built kind of as a little bit of Wild West in some ways. It seems like they kind of approved anything that anyone wanted to do at that point in time. And so those were built back in the 60s and 70s. Kind of unique to Fitchburg in the early 80s, Madison was starting to annex us because we were a town at that point in time. And a lot of people didn't like it. And we had a lawyer who lived in Fitchburg in that area and looked through all the laws of the state. And we said, you know what? We're going to stop this right now. We made our entire town a city. So our city boundaries are enormous, actually. There's a lawsuit, and they ended up changing the loophole because Madison wasn't very happy about that, and they didn't want other people to do that. But because of the way we started off, what we have for what's affordable housing is some very old properties in the north part. It's very condensed, and we've kind of grown from there and try to keep our growth responsible. We get a lot of pressures from landowners and farmers that want to kind of cash out, especially when they have developers tell them, I'll give you millions of dollars if I can develop this. And we're saying, well, that's, we've looked at a lot of different factors on where we should grow and why. And right now, for the next 30, 40 years, your property isn't one of those areas that we should grow responsibly because of lots of different things like city sewer and water. We can do gravity-fed sewer and water, things like that. Let's see here. Our mix of kind of single family or owner occupied versus rentals is about 50-50. I think it's like 52% renter right now, which has changed dramatically in the last 5 years with the rental boom. We've built a ton of apartments, but they're mostly not affordable housing. It's these, $1,500, $1,800 a month apartment complexes with the pools, and they're very nice. They're great, but it's not enabling anyone to move in there. You have to make pretty significant money to live in one of these places. And one of the things that I kind of saw was we were adding 500, 600 apartments a year, but not anywhere near that for owner-occupied things. And so I like to see a little bit more balance to keep that balance and a wide variety of housing options. So you have a lot of apartment options, but also condos, smaller houses, bigger houses. To me, what you really want is to have that mix, and you don't want neighborhoods that are only $1 million houses or neighborhoods that are only $250,000 houses or only apartments. I think that's where we've seen in our city that you run into issues, and the more you can diversify some of that mix, the better off you are. That's one of my hopes for North Patchy Road, is to really diversify that mix and put some ownership opportunities in there. And right now it's all rentals, so as much as we can while maintaining and enabling people to stay in Fitchburg. Let's see here. Other than that, I think I've got, so last piece on there, Section 8 vouchers. We actually have a lot in Fitchburg. Besides Madison, we have the most, but I don't know how familiar you are with it. There's two types, and they had talked about this earlier. Some are with people, and so you go and rent somewhere and you have your Section 8 to help pay for it, and some are attached to projects and rental units. For Fitchburg, the vast majority are the ones where the people have them, and that's fine, but there are a lot more guidelines and restrictions and requirements of the owners who have the Section 8 vouchers. They have to have a certain quality of housing for people to live in. And to me, if we can change that mix a little bit to have more of those types of vouchers, the better off we're going to be, because we're going to have higher quality housing. Right now, the places where these people are living, there's a lot of them that I wouldn't want anyone that I care about to live there. You know, there's not people putting money into it. Maybe they've owned it for a really long time. They might be older now, and they're just kind of making that income. They're just renting to whoever they can because they want that, $1,500 a month to keep living for themselves, and they don't really have the means to invest heavily in there. So, if we can do things like get Dane County Housing Authority to operate in Fitchburg, and they might be able to provide an opportunity for those people to essentially cash out and to sell those properties to someone like Dane County Housing Authority, who can then come in, invest in those properties, and bring them up to a lot higher standard. So, that's kind of one of my hopes anyway, is that we can make a little bit of a shift there to increase the quality while keeping that affordability for people who want to live in Fitchburg. So we did earlier this year approve our housing plan, and part of that is creating a housing advisory committee. That's going to have 9 people on it, and one of the things that I think is unique, at least compared to other committees we have, maybe your committees are different, of the 9 people, up to 3 of those people, I believe, can be people who aren't residents of Fitchburg. And we did that to make sure that we have the ability to get more experts on there, so that if there is someone that is an expert that can be a great benefit to us, that we can have them on there. I asked Kurt Paulson to be on there. That's all right. Kurt, you turned me down. That's all right. He's the only one that turned me down, but that's all right. He's a busy guy. He's going to everyone else's committee meetings apparently, and so he doesn't have time to stay and help us out because he's talking to all of you as well. But no, that's okay. And I think that to me, having that diversity, and we're fortunate to have a lot of great people that are going to be on this committee. We just approved 5 of the people this past week. I have another 3 that have committed to it. We just have to approve them. And then there's one more person who I'm talking to twist their arm a little bit and get on the committee as well. And like I mentioned, Dane County Housing Authority is the #1 issue that we're going to get done. Another one is to look at our fee structure. I know that we've heard from developers that they think our fees and costs are too high. When you look at it and you look at, if you reduce the park requirements and all these different things, the impact for a house is not that significant. And so I look at that and I say, well, yeah, that might save the builder a lot of money, but if a $350,000 house is $340,000, that doesn't make it affordable. So that's where I look at that and I kind of go, I think the park space is a key thing that we have in Fitchburg, and our park system is pretty unique and something that people love. So I look at that and I say, that might save you $1 million, but is it really enhancing the quality of what we have and what we're providing here in Fitchburg? But we also want to look at ways and programs to implement, knowing that we have these TIDs that are closing soon and all this money that we're going to have available for some kind of affordable housing option. How do we want to do that? What kind of programs do we really want to implement? Is it land banking or some other type of thing? So those are things that they're going to be looking at as well. A few other things here. Talked about the first couple already. Talked about the importance of having a neighborhood that has a lot of different housing types in there. One of the things that I haven't done a whole lot of research on, so this is just kind of a crazy elected official idea, but when we talk about developers looking for ways to reduce fees and do other unique things, I think a very unique and interesting thing might be to incentivize builders to sell or give lots to someone like Habitat for Humanity, so that you're essentially creating lots of different opportunities in your neighborhood. And to me, it's not putting those 10 houses over here in this block, it's dividing those and separating those out as much as possible. Because again, you don't want this block to be where all the Habitat homes are, and this is where all the apartments are over here, and this is where all the really big, expensive houses over here. As much as you can mix those up, I think the better off you are. I talked about North Fish Hatchery Road. That's an area that doesn't have ownership opportunities. If we can provide some kind of ownership opportunities, that's great. We don't have a lot of rentals with 3 bedrooms, and so adding some more of those is great as well. Senior citizen housing, that's a big piece for us as well. I think, I have neighbors who built their house in the 70s. A couple of years ago, the wife, her knees were bad. They had a split-level house. They couldn't stay in their house anymore, and unfortunately, they moved over to the west side at Oakwood Village. There just wasn't a lot of opportunity, a lot of things in Fitchburg for people who are seniors. So we have one big complex getting built right now. It's, I believe, 180 units. And I'm going to walk through it tomorrow. But a few months ago when I talked to the developer, they said they already had over 50 people on a waiting list, and they've done 0 advertising. So that tells you the demand and the need. And so that's good to hear that there's so much demand, but tells me, okay, we need to try and encourage some more things like that.
Are they full plus 180 plus 50? You mean?
No, they just have people on the waiting list to once they start renting. I think it's going to be in the spring. So these are people that just said, when you're open and you're renting, I want to be there. And that's with 0 advertising. So once they do some advertising, I'm guessing that a few more people will be calling them up. I talked to someone at an event, and they said that they lived kind of around the corner, and I think they were one of the people on the waiting list, and one of their moms, I can't remember if it was the husband or wife, but their mom, they're going to move in there because she lives over on the east side right now, and it's not as convenient, and so they want her closer and able to, pick her up and take her dinner or bring her over for dinner really easily. Talked about a few.
Question, are those
Yeah.
market rate?
No, they're not. I can't remember the different pieces to it, but no, they're not. Other than that, again, just trying to add more senior units with at least 80% affordability. Talked about a lot of the other pieces to this already. And here's just a few projects. So the one I talked about, the senior housing, is on the left side there. Egypt Plesco is developing that off of Fish Hatchery Road. It's 160 units, under construction right now. There's also in the town of Madison, which Fitchburg is going to acquire part of the town of Madison in a few years. Most of it's going to the city of Madison, but the town of Madison is dissolving. Bear Development created a 60-unit piece that opened up this year there. So that's great to see. And Artesian Village, again in town of Madison, 169 units opening up this upcoming spring. And then Limestone Ridge Apartments, there's 120 units there that's been approved. That's over by Target, if you know where that is, kind of off McKee Road. And that's when I look at, if you really think of the best place for something like affordable housing, to me that seems like a great place because it's going to be behind the Hy-Vee. So there's a Hy-Vee, there's a Super Target, the bus goes through there. There's pharmacy in those places as well. So they're just walkable. They can go to a bunch of different things. And so it's close to Verona Road, which is at least the main part of Verona Road is going to be done this year finally. The Nesbitt Road intersection, if you go through that area, is open. Nesbitt Road roundabout was also a big hassle for a lot of people. But so I think that's a spot that really makes a ton of sense versus, sometimes people want to put stuff essentially in a farm field on the edge of town. And I look at that and I say, well, that's not close to anything, some other houses. And, if some of these people have transportation issues and things like that, it doesn't seem like a great place. It seems like a place where a developer is trying to get maybe some cheaper land to put their project, but does it really make sense for those people who want to live there? So that's all I have.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you.
Great. We have time for a few questions. Anyone have questions for our panelists here? Yes, ma'am.
area in your municipal boundaries exclusive to single-family zoning. Have you looked into doing what, like Minneapolis did and said, okay, you can add a granny flat or an accessible in-law apartment or a garage apartment? Have you looked into that as kind of infill in existing
Just
areas?
this, so for folks, the folks that watching and recording here, the question is related to single-family zoning and allowing more accessory units within the zoning,
Or turning your big old single families into duplexes?
or breaking up the single-family uses into higher density uses. So just, anyway.
Yeah, that was one of the recommendations in the housing plan, is to pursue that and look into that. So it's something that we're considering doing more. I think the one thing that's kind of come out that is a little bit of a contradiction, is something that we're going to need to figure out with that, is Airbnbs, and a huge concern of people with Airbnbs and renting out their, at least part of their house, if not their whole house. We've seen some neighborhoods, and frankly, it's the wealthier neighborhoods, that where a house, there's one where someone bought a house and they were renting out, and the people just went ballistic about it. So that's something to figure out, how something like Airbnb would work with that. But there's something that we are, looking into as a possible thing to implement. I know, something different between us and someone like Monona is because we have so much land that's undeveloped. And so I think there is maybe a place for that, but it's not at this point a huge need. But we need to grow responsibly so that we don't get into some of the issues that, you mentioned. I can't remember which newspaper did the article about so many big cities, and Seattle, I think, is another one, where most of the city is single-family homes, and they put in all these restrictions so you can't do anything else and increase that density when you really need to. So something where, as we are continuing to develop neighborhoods that have a lot more diversity in them in terms of what types of housing is available, hopefully that takes care of some of that issue. But the ADUs, accessory dwelling units, is something that we're considering. Nothing has been approved at this point.
Yeah, I was just going to say, well, I guess I can use yours too. Yeah, that's one of the things that we've talked about in our meetings as well, and that's been something that's brainstormed. It requires, again, changes in zoning and all that kind of thing, which can be a tricky thing, and very politically tricky in a small town. So, yeah, that's been talked about with us too.
Not really in our community.
Not yet, anyway. Right, not yet. So, other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Karen, you mentioned NIMBYism, so I'm wondering how you've dealt with pushback from residents or community members on some of your affordable housing projects.
Questions related to dealing with NIMBYism, and I'm sure none of our panelists have ever had to deal with that. So, yeah.
Well, we don't have a project yet. So we anticipate that will be there, and so that's what our main goal is to try and get ahead of it as much as we can and let people know about the needs. And what we found in our conversations with people is everybody is supportive, and you guys all know this too. Everybody's supportive of affordable housing until it's in your backyard. So, but we are trying to be really cognizant of why people would be against something. I live in a neighborhood where there was a big pushback against some multifamily housing that came in, and honestly, the pushback was good. It reduced the density and it made everything more attractive, and yet, everybody got what they wanted. So it's not a bad thing, and I think it's a good thing to remember that, pushback isn't always negative. It can also create a much better project. But yeah, so for us, we don't have any projects. I haven't had to fight that yet. I'm sure you have, though.
Well, yeah, I think to me, the first sign of NIMBYism is when someone says, "Oh, my property values are going to go down." No, there's no research that shows that at all. I mean, it's completely unfounded, and they don't want to hear that either. But, that's, I think, the first sign of NIMBYism is my properties are going to go down. Well, no, actually, that's not the case at all. And sadly, I mean, a lot of these people, and maybe not if they're, in their 60s and 70s, but a lot of people lived in apartments at one point in time. I know I did. Mm-hmm. And how quick they are to forget that they were those people at one point in time. And whether it was what's affordable housing or not. And I think that's one of the challenges too, is that word triggers people and immediately makes them think the worst things, which I don't know why. I have no idea why that is the case, but I think that's why we try to use workforce housing even more than affordable housing at this point in time as well, to kind of at least change the perception a little bit, hopefully, and so that if they hear workforce housing, there's not the immediate negative reaction, which they shouldn't have, but people do.
I'll just say that I think that that's why education is so important, to let our community learn more about it. Like our village board didn't know a lot about it. I didn't know a lot about it, but the more I learn, the more that I think it's a good thing for our community, and we'll bring in more businesses. And it's just about educating our community.
I think that the important thing is really realizing that calling out and doing exactly what you're doing here, you don't have to wait to the conference to do this. Call your neighbors, call your other communities, talk to if they're large enough to have a planner or a planning staff, or, I think usually mayors are usually pretty accessible for these kinds of questions. Don't hesitate to reach out and ask about this. I know I like to say that give me a call. If I don't know the answer, I generally know who probably does, and I'll at least point you to the right direction. So don't ever be bashful about doing that. And along those lines, I'm going to take, for last session, George, you want to hop up here for just a second? If anybody doesn't know George Petak from the Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority, you should. And I just want to give George a little plug here. He sent out an email this morning that I thought would be good to share with everyone here this morning. So,
Thank you, Neil. Appreciate that. I represent WEDA, Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority, in 19 counties, central, south, and southwest Wisconsin, including Dane County. And at the end of the month, we're going to conduct a QAP listening session. WEDA is the allocator of tax credits throughout the state of Wisconsin. And one of the things that dictates how we do what we do is our qualified allocation plan. It's a 2-year plan. We're at the end of year 1 of a 2-year plan, and we are starting to gather information from individuals, developers, realtors, elected officials, who can help us as we adapt the QAP for the next round of housing tax credits. And so I've got a flyer here. If you're interested in this listening sessions in Mount Horeb at the end of the month, October 28th. And we will have WEDA experts, way more expert than I am, on the QAP. And you're welcome to come and offer your input on how we address the issue of priorities for housing tax credits going forward. So thank you, Neil. I really appreciate it.
thank you, George. So it's a unique opportunity to certainly ask them for their technical expertise, but if there's a particular issue that you're having in your community in terms of funding, I think George and his team would probably like to know about that in terms of why is something not quite working in your community. Is there something that their programs might be able to help with or make some adjustments to? So please don't be bashful. Please agree to participate in that. Kind of want to have a quick round of applause. Thank our panelists one more time. Thank you. I think they can hopefully stick around for a couple minutes if anybody has any questions. But with that, thank you all for coming today. Thank you.